All right, now 3 o'clock chat here after leading the Knicks to their deepest playoff run in 25 years and back-to-back 50-win seasons. New York has fired head coach Tom Thibodeau. Team president Leon Rose said their pursuit to win a championship led to the decision. NBA Finals will kick off Thursday. Pacers and Thunder from Oklahoma City tip off at 5:30 on ABC. Thunder favored by 9.5. The Oregon State Beavers hammered USC 9-zip and advanced to the Corvallis Super Regionals. They're going to meet Florida State Friday. First pitch at 3 on your home of the Beavs, 1190 KX or on 620 Rip City Radio. From the NFL, Lions center Frank Ragnow announced his retirement. He made 4 Pro Bowls in his 7 seasons. Longtime Minnesota Viking Jim Marshall has passed away at the age of 87. He played in 282 consecutive games during his 20-year career. Rip City Drive with Chad Doings coming up next. Sean Highkin will join me in studio at 4. And Brad Bakken previews the finals at 5:20.
It's time for the Rip City Drive. Brought to you by Goldberg Jones. Divorce for Men. Call 1-800-DIVORCE. Featuring the crazy and often irrational longtime Portland radio vet, Chad Doing.
The Bible says God uses the foolish things to confound the wise. So it was some foolish stuff that went on, but you know what? That gave them something that they needed. Like that gave them something that they said, all right, you know, that edge that Tom had, like it gave them that edge, it gave them that edge that you had, it gave them the edge that I have. You know, when folks say we're gonna be nothing, we weren't gonna be nothing, so we had to prove that. That gave them the edge that they needed. Both of them.
I actually have 7 years left on my contract. I'm like, there's no way I'm working 7 years. I says, I'm going to be a good soldier for Kenny, Ernie, and Shaq and the people I work with because I love the people I work with, especially behind the scenes. I said, but the best I can do is 2 years.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Doing starts now.
All right, what's going on, my friends? I was trying to figure out as I was driving to the station today if I would remember how to do this. I haven't been at work in almost 3 weeks, and I can't remember the last time I took this long away from work. And so getting behind the microphone today, I was actually a little bit nervous. I mean, I always have a little bit of butterflies before the light goes on, but today a little bit nervous just as I was trying to get my thoughts together and try to figure out what's going on. But it's great to be back. I will explain how my vacation went down in Los Angeles with my 4 Dodger games. They lost every game. Hit Disneyland and set new records, which was pretty awesome. And then I got sick, actually pretty sick, when I got back into town. And that's what led to the extended period of time away from work. But I'm back, and I'm ready to get things going. We've got a 4-pack of tickets for the Hillsboro Hops coming up at 5 o'clock. It's Hops Ticket Tuesday, your chance to sit in the Rip City Radio row. We'll do that at 5. We're going to talk with DJ OG1 and Michelle Jalali from the Portland Trailblazers coming up in 20 minutes to preview a big event in their summer series coming up on Friday. So we'll get details on that coming up at 3:20. Sean Highkin, our Trailblazer insider, is going to stop by at 4. He'll join me in studio, and we'll get a chance to talk about the Trailblazers, the upcoming NBA draft, which is on June 25th, and get some details on him. But more importantly, what he's hearing in regard to what the Trailblazers are going to do this summer. Are they going to take a player in the draft? Are they going to look to make a deal? What about Jeremy Grant? What about Anthony Simons? What about the other vets on the roster? We'll get all the details from Sean Highkin coming up at 4 o'clock. And then at 5:20, it's very simple. NBA Finals preview, my friends. Brad Bakken, CBS Sports, who is one of my absolute favorites because I know that he knows what's going on. Love talking ball with him. I want to get his take on the matchup, on the finals. And most importantly, I want to know if we're going to get more than a 5-game series. I'll be honest with you. I'll probably be pulling for Indiana, I guess, because I'm a fan of Rick Carlisle, the Jim Carrey lookalike. I really think he does a heck of a job as a head coach. And I think Indiana, not to take any jabs at Oklahoma City because they're tremendous, but I really like the idea of the Pacers. The way they play, their pace, they share the basketball. They've been very entertaining throughout the course of the playoffs. Both teams very deserving to be where they're at right now, and they've had some sensational play. But it looks to me like a short series. Like Oklahoma City is the prohibitive favorite, and for good reason. They have better players. They have better defense. They can just match up with Indiana and get up and down in ways that the New York Knicks could not. So the matchup should be good. I don't think the ratings are going to be great because it's Indiana and Oklahoma City, and a lot of people are not familiar with those teams, those towns, or some of the star players, although guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are making a name for themselves. It's just not your usual star power when you have guys in there like LeBron or Kevin Durant or Steph Curry, right? I think we understand that, Boston. So there you have it. So we'll get a finals preview, and I can't wait to get his take on the Knicks' decision to fire Tom Thibodeau. And I guess that's where we're going to start the show today. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you can do so. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. 503-248-0620. That's the number to reach me here on the show, and we can have a little chat. You can check out our YouTube page. Just go to YouTube and pull up Rip City Radio 620, and you can watch the live stream, or you can tune in through the iHeartRadio app. It really doesn't matter. You do you, and then we can enjoy the next 3 hours together, all right? It's pretty good. Brendan Slaughter is here. You can also hit me on social media at Chad in Rip City. But we're going to start with the Knicks because they're a franchise that appeared to be on the right path, but yet today we are reminded who they are truly led by. It is James Dolan, one of the worst owners in all of sports and an a-hole. That's how we know him. A guy that makes bad decisions, does a poor job of running his team, might do an even worse job of being a front man for his crappy band. You name it, he screws it up wherever he goes. And the weird part about this firing of Tom Thibodeau is it comes off the deepest playoff run in 25 years and also back-to-back 50-win seasons. They haven't had this type of success since Van Gundy was coach. And the weird part is they were just a couple of steps away from the NBA Finals. And let's face it, if it wasn't for an act of God where that basketball hit the back iron and went through the hoop in game number 1, the Knicks are going to win that series. But they got punked, they get knocked out, and now Tom Thibodeau is moving on. The weird part, though, is the way it's being positioned or the way that the story is being told through the media. And that's the team president, Leon Rose, is the guy who made the decision. Now, if you've watched sports long enough and you've been around the NBA, the NFL, or whatever your sport of choice is, you know, when you watch sports long enough and you get an idea of who's in charge with different teams, who makes the decisions, who the ownership is, well, you know which teams have owners that make bad decisions or not. I don't believe for 1 second that Leon Rose, who I believe is Tom Thibodeau's agent and someone that is very tight with his coach, Tom Thibodeau, I don't think he made the decision to move on from Tom Thibodeau. I think this is absolutely a James Dolan decision. Now, keep in mind, this is the same guy who used his money and influence, and mostly a heck of a lot of money, to force his way into being an opening act with his band, JD and the Straight Shot, to open up for the Eagles on their concert tour a couple of years ago. Like, I showed up at Moda Center, and I was ready to get down with my boys and listen to some great music. And all of a sudden, there was this opening act, and I'm like, wait, who's JD and the Straight Shot? And they come out on stage, and they got this front man singing not so well and telling a lot of bad stories. And I'm like, that's James Dolan. Unbelievable. He sucks, and yet he's up there opening up for the Eagles. There are so many musicians who would give their right arm to be in that position with that type of crowd. But, of course, James Dolan, not good enough on merit, able to use his mad cash to be able to do that. And, heck, if I had that type of money, I'd probably do the same thing. But this guy's a buffoon, and, of course, he made the decision. And let's face it, Tom Thibodeau, great coach, but he's not a guy that has a long shelf life. He is kind of a bitterman. I respect Tom Thibodeau, and I think he's a great coach and a very good defensive mind, and he gets the most out of his teams. There's no question about that. But I have a feeling he's one of those guys where if you're around him for an extended period of time, he kind of grinds on you. He kind of wears on you. Similar to the way that he always runs his players into the ground. I mean, really, that's the big knock on Coach Thibodeau. Very intense, doesn't like to play young guys, doesn't really care about his bench, and will ride his guys that he trusts for long minutes. No question about it. But the weird part is, if it wasn't for that ridiculous circus shot in game one that cost him, and they're in the NBA Finals, do you think Tom Thibodeau's getting fired? Like, what did he say or what happened that pissed off James Dolan? That's what I want to know. Now, of course, when it comes to New York matters, one of the very best in being able to discuss these is Mad Dog. And he went ballistic and really was upset with the decision for the Knicks to fire their head coach, Tom Thibodeau. Let's take a listen to his breakdown on Mad Dog Radio.
And I don't want to hear everybody say, well, he's one of these guys who takes you to a certain level and you can, but he can't take you all the way. Oh, nonsense. Take you to a certain level. Anybody who knows anything about basketball knows that Indiana had better players and more of them than the Knicks did. Much more of them. Much more of them. And everybody knows, who follows, who sees, who watches the NBA, knows if Anthony Towns or OG make a free throw, or if God didn't let the ball bounce in with Halliburton's 3 or 2 at the end of game one, the Knicks would have won that series.
That's true.
But this is about Dolan. Don't let anybody hear you. Don't let anybody in America hear you say, this is Leon Rose. Nonsense. Nonsense. Rose and Thibodeau are tight. He's his agent. This has got nothing to do with it. You think Rose wanted to fire Tom Thibodeau after he got to a conference final? But Rose doesn't have any power there. Dolan does. He sits on the baseline with a dopey hat on, thinking that he knows something about, but he wouldn't even know who George Mikan is. He knows nothing. He's there because his old man was a brilliant businessman, and he took over. That's what this is all about. Oh, my God. It's the guy that ran Marv Albert out of the building. Can't figure out a way to get Oakley straightened out and get him back in the good graces of the franchise. What a joke. You know what? Here's what I want. This is such a ridiculous and such a stupid firing. Have Dolan have the... First off, he's awful when he talks because he fumbles. He doesn't come clean. Oh, he's terrible. He's not what you think of when you have an executive. But have him... I don't want to hear from Rose. Rose be the bag man. I don't want to hear from Rose. Everybody knows that Rose had nothing to do with this. This is Dolan. Have Dolan sit there and get peppered with questions by legitimate media people, not guys who work... And I'm not saying they're not legitimate, but they're in a difficult situation. Not the guys who work for MSG. Let them have a press conference for, I don't care if it takes 6 hours, and everybody has a chance to go and ask them a why. Because this is not fair. This is not fair, what they did to this guy, who gave his life and blood to the franchise and took him to the conference. Fun I've been there since 2000. My God almighty. And you get him out? Because you lost a rugged 6-game series to Indiana? Oh, come on, please. What a disgrace.
There you go. That's Mad Dog sharing his thoughts. All right, when we come back on the Rip City Drive, we're going to focus in on Rip City Vibes, which is part of the summer series with your Portland Trail Blazers. I'll be joined by DJ OG1 and Michelle Jalali here on the Rip City Drive. All right, Rip City Vibes, which kicks off the Trailblazers Summer Series, is a Black Music Month kickback, an annual event held at Black-owned bar Jackie's to celebrate Black music and artists. And joining me right now to discuss the event coming up this Friday, June 6th, from your Portland Trailblazers, DJ OG1 and Senior DEI Director Michelle Jalali. Michelle and DJ OG1, thanks for taking time to join the Rip City Drive. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having us.
No, it's great. Michelle, the first question is for you. Can you give my listeners the background on your summer series and Rip City Vibes?
Definitely. So, to top off our summer series, which is a series of events where the Blazers are out in community, we are going to kick it off with Rip City Vibes. And as you mentioned, it's an annual Black Music Month kickback where we're hosting it each June in collaboration with local DJs, and we're hosting it at Black-owned bar Jackie's. Really to celebrate the impact of Black music and Black artists in Portland and beyond.
That's pretty awesome. Now, OG, it's great to hear your voice, my friend. I know you are familiar with the music scene here in Portland. How would you describe the local music scene and the young Black musicians and DJs that are coming up?
Interesting enough, I feel like the city is in a bit of a transition. I mean, we have the OGs that have been, doing great work in the city, but I think there's a whole movement of young creatives now that are hitting the scene and really doing amazing work. And I get to, from a DJ standpoint, having a lineup of DJs at Rip City Vibes that, I don't have to work. In terms of DJ, I get to host and really kind of present these up-and-coming younger DJs, which is I'm really excited about.
And you know what I was excited about when I had a chance to meet your son for the first time at a Trailblazer game this year doing his work up there at the Pines. That was awesome.
Yeah, he's doing his thing. I mean, we have a whole lineup of DJs. Obviously, DJ OG2, but we have DJ Pounce and Dre Slaps. We have Bad Beatini, DJ Ashe, DJ Aspen, Motaz, and hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody. But we have 8 DJs. Oh, Silky C.
Oh, nice.
DJ Silky C. So we have a nice lineup with a variety of vibes in terms of music choices. So the people are going to have some fun.
We're talking Rip City Vibes with Michelle Jalali and DJ OG1 from your Portland Trailblazers. Michelle, I do admire the Trailblazers' effort to bring people together in the community, especially with the effort to highlight minority voices within the fan base. What's been the response to the events from the fans, and how are things continuing to develop on your end with the efforts that you guys have put forth?
You know what? Each year we continue to grow and grow, and especially with an event like this, it was created to celebrate Black music, Black artists, and foster a space where, Rip City can come together and really celebrate and be in community. And I feel like that response has been so positive. Folks are excited to do something in the summer. They're excited to gather in community. We're excited to be out there with our partners with Ticketmaster, with Sprite. Raising money, too, for a nonprofit, I think has been really valuable because our fans and our community are so amazing. And we're coming together, and proceeds for a raffle are going to be going to Friends of Noise, one of the nonprofits that we work with. And, it's just a beautiful thing to continue to build. We see it in the community all the time when you're able to kind of gather in space. Folks are in a great mood, and the sun will be out. And I think we're just looking for how we can continue to build throughout the year.
Now, one thing I believe you're going to have on Friday at Jackie's, aren't you doing a raffle which will go to benefit the nonprofit?
Yes, we are. So folks can actually enter to win. It's a 50-50 raffle, but you can also enter to win tickets to some of the up-and-coming concerts coming to the Moda Center, including Wu-Tang. So we're really, really excited about that because folks can, win something back by also giving to our nonprofit partner, Friends of Noise, who's really focused on the development of young people, especially young BIPOC people, in their own creative journeys.
Hey, OG, I wanted to ask you, how did you develop your chops as a DJ? Are you self-taught, or did you have mentors that brought you along? How did that creative process work out for you?
Well, initially, it was self-taught, and then doing a lot of just kind of watching other DJs when I was younger and just kind of picking up skills. And then once I got to Portland and got around some of the amazing DJs here, then it was just kind of like, I'm in the spaces with other DJs and, iron sharpen iron. And then I just kind of created my own kind of style and approach to DJing from there.
That's terrific. We're talking with Michelle Jalali and DJ OG, one of your Portland Trailblazers, getting ready for Rip City Vibes coming up on Friday at Jackie's from 7 to 10. Now, Michelle, the event is free, but you're asking people to register ahead of time. Where can they do that?
Yes, it is a free event, but register ahead of time because sometimes those lines get long. You can go online to events.ripcity.com/RipCityVibes, and the first 200 attendees will receive some free food, some free cocktails, and of course, we have some cool giveaways as well.
Now, I did read that correctly then. So actually, free cocktails and free food for the first 200 people to attend. That's it's hard to find a good value like that in today's world.
We wanted to make sure we hooked it up, especially for the folks that come out early so that they can support our DJs who are kicking it off right at 7 o'clock.
Now, Michelle, I think this year's going to be a little bit different because you're utilizing not just the space inside of Jackie's, but also the parking lot as well. So how's it going to be set up when people arrive?
Well, you're going to have to come to find out. But what I will say is, as you are walking up, you will feel the vibes and you will hear the vibes. The parking lot will have 2 featured DJs, some cool activities, some cool photo ops, and a space for folks to kind of lounge and hang out before entering Jackie's, or instead of actually walking in there. Just 2 different aesthetics, 2 different vibes, but it's definitely going to be an elevated feel to what folks have experienced over the past 2 years.
That's great. Now, OG, as you mentioned, because there's so many great DJs, you can just sit back and admire and enjoy the music. But when you're watching, are you still learning from other DJs, even younger ones, in terms of seeing something that maybe you haven't seen before, or learning a new technique or style for the way you present your music as well?
Always. I think as a DJ, you always need to be open to learning new things. And, DJing when I first started, on vinyl was totally different than the digital age now. And so there's things that are much more easier in terms of technology in DJing. So some of the younger DJs, they lock in real quick on that. Whereas for me, it's easier on one hand, because I'm not carrying crates of records. But, from the technical side, being able to pick up some of those skills from the younger DJs and see kind of how they approach it. I'm always open to learning new things. So
that's terrific. Now, when you're at a Blazer game, and I see you there, all the time, are you given certain directions in terms of what you're supposed to play, or do they just let you be you and DJ it and do it the way you want?
Yeah, other than, keeping it, clean and appropriate, for the, the crowd, pretty much the Blazers have let me just do my thing, and that's what, I enjoy so much is that they don't tell me what to play. They just say, hey, just make sure that, it's appropriate, but, be as creative as you need to be to get the crowd going. That's
terrific. Now, Michelle, I wanted to ask you, I'm a big fan of the summer series. Aside from Rip City Vibes, can you give us an idea of some other events that are coming up throughout the course of the summertime with the Trailblazers?
Most definitely. The Blazers will be out in community all throughout the summer. You can catch us at Juneteenth. You can catch us at Good in the Hood, Latino Cultural Fest, of course, the Pride Parade. So you'll be seeing us in a few places, making sure that we are, out in Rip City, amplifying the voices of Rip City and supporting the people who are really doing the great work in our community.
That's terrific. Rip City Vibes is coming up this Friday, which is June 6th. It's going to be out at Jackie's from 7 until 10. The first 200 attendees are going to receive complimentary food and cocktails. It's a free event, but they want you to pre-register. You can do so. Just go to events.ripcity.com/RipCityVibes. Michelle, I'll give you the final word in terms of the event. Anything else you want to get out to the masses and any details?
You know what? We're just really, really excited. We hope that our fans will show up and come out to the event. It is amazing to collaborate with DJ OG1 and host, 8 incredible local Black DJs. We're celebrating Black music. We're celebrating Black culture, Black artists, and just being in community with each other. So we look forward to seeing you there.
And OG, it's great to hear your voice, man. How's everything else going? Your health is good, and everything else is just fine.
Yes, health is good, man. You know, these young folks are keeping me on my toes, man. So, I have to stay active, but everything's great, man.
But that's good for you, right? Though, isn't it good to be pushed and feel some of that competition, or to see the way others are trying to perfect their craft to keep you, continuing to work and continue to get better?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It keeps me from being complacent.
All right. DJ OG1, Michelle Jalali here on the Rip City Drive. Hey, guys, I really appreciate the time. We look forward to an event this Friday. It's going to be out at Jackie's from 7 to 10. Again, a free event, but you can pre-register. Go to events.ripcity.com/ripcityvibes. The first 200 attendees will get complimentary food and cocktails, and they're going to highlight some of the great black musicians and DJs and black music here in the local area, which is wonderful. I really appreciate you guys taking time to talk about the event.
Thanks so much for having us.
You got it. There you go. DJ OG1, good people. Michelle Jalali, good people here on the Rip City Drive, and we certainly appreciate that. Awesome. Awesome. And that event again out at Jackie's, 7 to 10 on Friday. And pre-register, just go to events.ripcity.com/ripcityvibes. It is 3:31. You've got the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing. We're going to have Sean Hyken in studio coming up at 4 o'clock. And then at 5:20, I'll be joined by Brad Bakken of CBS Sports, and we'll preview the NBA Finals. And it is very odd to be back in the chair. I have been off for nearly 3 weeks, part vacation, part illness, and now I'm back. And it feels great to be back in studio, but I was a little bit nervous today. My man Tony in Boring has reached out. He said, "Welcome back, homie. My jaw dropped when you told me Tom Thibodeau got fired. WTF?" I had the same reaction. I was getting ready and doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and all of a sudden I saw the headline come across my phone. I'm like, what? I thought, much like the Luka trade, that it was wrong. I was like, that didn't happen. Why would they get rid of Coach Thibodeau? And then I was quickly reminded, like, oh, yeah, their owner's James Dolan. And, of course, James Dolan would do something dumb because that's what he does. I don't believe for a second that it's Leon Rose. This is a James Dolan decision. You can smell it. It's got the smell and the feel of a James Dolan decision. It's probably a mistake. Now, if they were smart, and again, they're not because they're run by James Dolan, but it would make a lot of sense to maybe go after Michael Malone. If you're going to fire Coach Thibodeau, very successful coach, then you might want to go after someone that can come in and really get the most out of the roster. But again, how much of that is on Thibodeau? I'm always torn when it comes to coaches because it's easy to point to Thibodeau and say, well, he's never won a championship. Yeah, well, Jerry Sloan never won a championship, and he was a darn good basketball coach. Rick Adelman never won a championship, and yet he's a pretty darn good basketball coach. There's a lot of great coaches who have never been able to get over the hump. I've seen some people comparing Thibodeau to Dwayne Casey, and now they just need to go out and find their Nick Nurse. Well, the one thing that Nurse had that Dwayne Casey didn't was Kawhi Leonard. The biggest issue I see with the Knicks is Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. They're both terrific players, but they're also liabilities on defense. And when they were on the floor together, the Pacers attacked them relentlessly. That was their entry point into the Knicks defense. We'll just go after Brunson and Cat, and we'll continue to expose them for their deficiencies on defense. That's what they did, and they had great success with it. So we'll see how things go. I would have kept it together, and I would have not made wholesale changes. I would have gone out to try and, work in the margins to improve depth because I like their top-line players. And they went out, and this is the weird part, too. They went out specifically with a plan to put together a roster that could contend with the Boston Celtics. That's why they get OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. And it worked. They won the series. But they ran into a hot basketball team that got a very lucky shot in game one and that derailed the Knicks in the series. But again, that was the deepest run in 25 years and back-to-back 50-win seasons. So we'll see where they go from here. Is it Coach Malone? That would probably be okay, but Michael Malone is a lot like Tom Thibodeau, a little rough around the edges. Winner, no question about it. Good coach, no question about it. But he's not the friendliest guy. Not that I care about that. I'm just saying that he's going to ruffle feathers as well. And James Dolan will probably get ticked off at him as well.
I will say this, Chad. Michael Malone seems to be pretty cozy in his new TV gig. Talked about that a little bit last week. I thought someone who has the personality that he does and kind of being the gruff that we know, interesting choice to have him be talking on TV, don't you think?
Yeah, that's what's so annoying about coaches is that they're all, most of them, not all of them, but the majority of coaches are incredible speakers. And a lot of them could be people to run Fortune 500 companies. They know how to motivate. They know how to communicate. And when you hear a guy like Michael Malone breaking down the game on television, you're like, wow, he knows a little bit more about the game than I do. He's terrific. Just like Bill Belichick. When Bill Belichick wants to be warm and fuzzy, he can be. We saw him on the set of College Game Day when he was talking Army-Navy.
I mean, even on the, the Manning cast. When
he's terrific.
Yeah, it's like, where's this guy been? So, yeah.
He's been great on TV. Yeah, he's terrific. But when he gets behind the microphones, when he's talking to the press about his football team, he puts on a different side because he doesn't want to talk about his football team, which is interesting to me. But yeah, the Knicks, I mean, what can you do? I thought they were turning a corner. I thought, you know what? Less James Dolan, more Leon Rose. The team's moving in the right direction. They've really been a fun team to watch the last couple of years. And that's the one thing I appreciate about Coach Thibodeau is that, and I mentioned this throughout the course of the year, the Knicks were fun to watch because that was a team that they played with a certain level of togetherness. They played their asses off. They were hard-nosed, tough, which is what you would expect from a Coach Thibodeau team. So I got respect for Coach Tibs. He was also the defensive mastermind for Doc Rivers for that Celtics team that won the championship when they beat Kobe and the Lakers. You know, Thibodeau's a very good defensive mind. He might want to learn something about a reserve basketball player, maybe at some point in the future, because he does like to play guys a ridiculous number of minutes. The guys he trusts, like Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson. It's like, dude, they are human. They may not look like it sometimes, but their bodies will break down, coach. And coaching, you know, Thibodeau looks like he's been president for a couple of terms. You know, presidents, they go in and they come out looking like a different human. They lose hair. They get gray. The stress. I mean, Coach Thibodeau is always gripping. Like, you could see it, man. He's always like, I don't know. He's just always grinding it. And that's a hard-nosed dude right there. So we'll see how things shake out. But it's probably a wrong. There's just certain people you know. Like, I don't need someone to tell me it's a bad choice. When James Dolan makes decisions, it's a bad decision. Just like using your money to force your way in front of the Eagles when you don't deserve it based on merit because you suck as a front man for a band. Like, that was a bad decision. Treating Charles Oakley like trash, bad decision. Get rid of Marv Albert, bad decision. Marv Albert is like the greatest NBA voice of all time. We're going to kick that guy out. Yeah, so basically everything he does is wrong. So we know that this one's not right either, right? If Dolan does it, it's bad. That's how I know. And you know, too. If James Dolan makes a call, it's the wrong call because he doesn't make the right call. Well, maybe hiring Leon Rose was okay. But just, again, you got to understand, there's no way that Leon Rose made that call. And I love what he said, too. Our singular pursuit is to win a championship. You better hope you hire a good coach then. Good luck with that. Would Michael Malone want to work for a guy like James Dolan? I don't know, but he would probably want to take some of his money. James Dolan must have really wanted to get rid of Coach Tibs, too, because I think he owes him like $30 million. And if I was Coach Tibs, I wouldn't take a job anywhere else. I would sit it out and make the Knicks pay every dime. Make James Dolan pay you. All right, we'll keep things rolling. 4-pack of tickets for the Hops at 5. Sean Hiken in studio at 4. Hope you're enjoying your Tuesday afternoon. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing. Well, I haven't even been back for an hour, and Miranda's chimed in. Dear Skunk Vomit, good afternoon, Mr. Doing. The next time you have someone on air who knows about sports, would you please ask her or him a question? What is the current Major League Baseball record that will never be broken? I just learned that Cy Young had 749 complete games, never got approached. In 2024, there were 28 complete games for all of Major League Baseball. By the way, there is an award in baseball that is kind of big deal, a pitching award named for Mr. Young. You should check it out sometime if you ever learn about our national pastime. Well, the records that I'm most interested in, to kind of answer your question, Miranda, number one, Nolan Ryan has 7 career no-hitters. No one's ever going to break that record. And in addition to that, I love Nolan Ryan, by the way. He's one of my absolute favorites. I admire him. Just an absolute badass. In addition to his 7 no-hitters, which spanned multiple decades, he threw a record 7 no-hitters during his Major League career, 3 more than any other pitcher. The no-hitters spanned 3 decades. In those 7 games, Ryan accumulated a total of 94 strikeouts and 26 walks, a ratio of 3.6 strikeouts per walk. It's pretty good. But in addition to these 7 no-hitters, he also threw 12 one-hitters and 18 two-hitters. The guy's unbelievable. The Express. So there you have it. And also, Miranda, you should know that on Friday, it looks like we're going to simulcast the Oregon State Beavers on 620 Rip City Radio. So less of me, more baseball. It's a win for you, Miranda. You should be happy. But I do love Nolan Ryan. The flame-throwing right-hander was a statistical marvel with more strikeouts, 5,714, and walks, 2,795, than any other pitcher in history. 7 no-hitters and 324 wins. Also a physical anomaly pitching into his mid-40s. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame back in 99. Chosen on 491 out of 497 ballots. All right, we've got Sean Hyken coming in studio, and he'll join me coming up at 4 o'clock. So basically what happened is, I went to L.A. for a week. I went down for baseball and for a one-day stop at Disneyland. And I checked out a 3-game series with the Dodgers and Angels. I saw Ohtani hit a couple of moonshots. If I were the Dodgers and Ohtani wanted to pitch, I'd be like, sorry, bro. I know we said that we might do that when we gave you $1 billion, but we're not doing that. He's too valuable. He's way too valuable as a bat. I'm not letting him pitch and risking injury. Although it's probably tempting because every other pitcher they've signed seems to get hurt every other week. So I'm not doing that. He's great. But they lost all 3 games to the Angels because their pitching was awful and their middle relief was awful. And then I saw the first game on Monday against the Diamondbacks, and they lost that one too. I did see Clayton Kershaw's season debut. He did not pitch well, but it was pretty awesome because I got tickets from the gentleman who runs iHeart down in Los Angeles. And so they set me up right behind home plate. And let's just put it, I was down there with people I shouldn't have been sitting around. I didn't fit in, to be exact. But I looked over, I was like, whoa, that's James Worthy. And the sweet part about Worthy, he wore 42 for the Lakers, same number as Jackie Robinson, and he's got his own Dodgers jersey on with the 42, and it says Worthy on the back. And he was super cool, fist-bumping people. Billie Jean King was there, and Matt Stafford was there to watch Kershaw, who I think he went to high school with. And it was great because it was just Matt Stafford and his daughters. And he was running back and forth, getting ice cream and different snacks, being a dad. But Dodger Stadium's awesome. So I had a great time watching baseball. And then I hit Disneyland for a day. And I set the personal record from open to close. So from 8 a.m. all the way up until midnight, 30 rides in one day. I thought, if you're going to charge me that much money to get in, I'm going to get my money's worth, 30. And I got into the Haunted Mansion like at 12 o'clock. I was the last person on the ride. So 30, 3-0. Last time I went down, I hit 21. So 9 more. The advantage was this was in May. So it was on a level 2 day, whatever that means. But basically, the kids are still in school, so it was less crowded. So it was awesome. I had a great time. But when I got back, I got up the next morning, played golf, and then I went and worked out. So I was trying to do too much all at once. And then I got up the next day and I started feeling a little bit weird. And by Friday night, I was cramping and feeling really awful. And the next morning I took a test, got COVID. And for a couple of days, I was just destroyed. But this time around, compared to the last time back in like late 2021, a couple of days of awfulness, and then the rebound was quick. And so I thought, you know what? I'm not going to try and do work when I've got the congestion. So I just shut it down for another week. And there you have it. And now I'm back. But I feel good. I feel good, and I'm happy to be back. And we got a lot of good things coming up. The draft is on June 25th. We've got the NBA Finals kicking off on Thursday. I was disappointed to see Oklahoma get knocked out by Texas Tech last night in the bottom of the 7th. So you're going to have Texas Tech and Texas in the Women's College World Series. Oregon State's going to be hosting the Super Regional in Corvallis this weekend. First game on Friday against Florida State. First pitch at 3 o'clock. So a lot of good things going on. I appreciate your time. Great to be back. Rip City Drive with Chad Doing. You can jump on board at 503-248-0620. You can find me on social at Chad and Rip City. When we come back, our Trailblazer insider, Sean Hyken, is going to join me in studio here on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. Hey, what's going on? It's 4 o'clock. Chad here. We start with the NBA, where after leading the Knicks to their deepest playoff run in 25 years and back-to-back 50-win seasons, the Knicks have fired head coach Tom Thibodeau. Team president Leon Rose said their pursuit to win a championship led the decision. Finals will kick off Thursday. Pacers and Thunder from Oklahoma City. Tip-off at 5:30 on ABC. Thunder favored by 9.5. The Oregon State Beavers hammered USC 9-zip and advanced to the Corvallis Super Regionals. They're going to meet Florida State Friday. First pitch at 3 on your home of the Beavs, 1190 KX, and on 620 Rip City Radio. Lions center Frank Ragnow announced his retirement. He made 4 Pro Bowls in his 7 seasons. Longtime Minnesota Viking Jim Marshall passed away at the age of 87. He played in 282 consecutive games during his 20-year career. Sean Hyken, our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report, is up next in studio.
I've got it on.
All right, my good friend Sean Hike and our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report is in studio. So today was one of those classic days where I'm busy doing like 20 different things, and I see the headline come across my phone, Tom Thibodeau has been fired by the Knicks, and I'm like, I thought it was wrong. I was like, there's no way. How much did that surprise you?
A little bit. I mean, everything we had kind of heard from outside, from after the Knicks lost the series to Indy over the weekend was that Tibs was probably safe.
Yeah.
So when I saw that today, I mean, I was a little bit surprised. I was actually on my way back from the Blazers practice facility because they had another one of their little pre-draft workouts today, and I saw that one come across, and I was like, okay, all right, I can sort of see it because, he's been there for 5 years.
Yeah.
Chicago, he was there for 5 years. He was in Minnesota for 3.5 years. Obviously, that was a disaster for like different reasons with the Jimmy stuff. 5 years is about and I think obviously with the Knicks, what they've been for most of this century compared to what they've been over the last few years with Tibs, by far the most success that they've had as a franchise since that 99 finals run has been with Tibs. But he also, 5 years is kind of the shelf life for him. It's just kind of how it's gone in other places.
Yeah, there's no question because he's one of those guys who he's very intense, and I could see how he would grind on you over the course of time. He obviously does on his players because he demands so much from them and he plays them large minutes. But if you're dealing with him in the front office, if you're dealing with him as an owner, I could see Thibodeau kind of wearing on you over the course of time.
Well, it did seem like the Knicks front office situation, the Knicks front office and coaches, coach and staff, all that stuff was a little bit more aligned than maybe the Chicago. I was in Chicago for the last 2 years of the Tibs era, and that got so bad. That was like, that one, like it started when they fired his lead assistant, Ron Adams, out from under him, who's been in Golden State with Steve Kerr for like 10 years.
Yeah.
But then, and so, Tom, obviously, to your point about the minutes, he never liked being told like how much he could or couldn't play guys. And so there was his last year, Joakim Noah had a knee surgery going into that year. And so he was on a minutes restriction. And I'll never forget this. There was a game that they lost in Oklahoma City, and Joakim didn't play in the fourth quarter. And we asked him afterwards, why didn't Joe play in the fourth quarter? And he was like, well, I ran out of minutes in my minutes restriction. So he would just like do stuff like that just sort of to prove a point. So if him and the front office aren't all on the same page, like it can kind of get to, places where it's toxic. I don't think it got to that point necessarily in New York. It's just, I think, they just decided to move on. They decided to move in a different direction.
Yeah. The only thing I'm not buying in the way it's being presented, I don't believe that was a Leon Rose decision. I think it was a James Dolan decision because Rose and Thibodeau are tight. And I believe that Rose is his agent, right?
Was.
Yeah.
CAA, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
they have a good relationship.
Yeah.
I just know that when bad decisions are made when it involves the Knicks, we have a long enough track record to know who's behind them. That's James Dolan. Now, I'm not saying that it can't work with another coach. I just would have, with the progress that they've made, because they put a team together to beat the Celtics, and they won the series. I would have brought everything back one more year and then tried to add a little extra depth to help Thibodeau out throughout the course of the long season and the postseason. But, Michael Malone's available. The Knicks are a big market. It shouldn't be too difficult for them to land a coach who can come in and hopefully have great success. But I just like the work that Thibodeau did. And I enjoyed watching the Knicks over the last couple of years because the one thing I do respect about Coach Tibbs is his guys played hard for him. They were fun to watch.
Well, the thing about hold on, I had something insightful about this that I was going to say.
No, this is great.
Completely
No,
forgot.
this is important to understand that you have just experienced what I experience on a regular basis, where I have this genius idea, and I'm getting ready to drop a really good take, and then I just lose my train of thought.
Completely.
Yeah, and then I have to wait until it pops back in, and so that's going to happen with you. But I'm glad to know that it doesn't just happen to me; that it can happen to the great Sean Hyken too.
It happens to everybody. No, I actually did have something to say about the Tibs thing, but yeah, it was certainly interesting, the timing of it. But it did sound like, from everything that was going into this, that he was going to be safe, and then he wasn't. So
what's crazy though is we're basically talking about one shot that hit the back of the iron, went straight up in the air, and came through the net.
I remembered what I was going to say.
Okay.
So, to your point about, they built a team basically to beat the Celtics.
Yeah.
Not only did they beat the Celtics, but the Celtics, Jason Tatum is probably not going to play next year. So the Celtics are basically not going to be a factor next year too.
Yeah.
So,
and the East is wide open.
You look at the rest of the East, like this Indiana team that just went to the finals, or that's going to the finals. They're going to have all their guys. They're still going to be pretty good. The Cavs, I think, are going to, obviously they had a bunch of injuries in the playoffs. I think they're still going to be pretty good. Other than that, the Celtics are probably not going to really be a factor. Orlando, maybe they make the jump if they get another guy. But really, there's a whole lot of not, the Bucks, even if Giannis stays there, like Dame's not going to play next year. They don't really have any, way of getting better. So the Knicks were kind of well set up to just kind of run this back and be able to just kind of do that.
Yeah.
And, yeah, but I guess I can kind of see it from the standpoint of, you look at the Knicks roster, after the summer that they had last summer, they trade like 5 first-round picks or whatever for Mikal Bridges, and then they make that cat trade right before training camp. Their roster right now is pretty much what their roster is. I mean, there are things they could do. I think if they wanted to move Josh Hart, they probably could. If they wanted to move Mikal Bridges, they probably could, although they wouldn't get the kind of value back for him that they gave up for him.
Yeah.
So they have kind of these other, they have a few little levers they can pull, but usually if you decide, we want to make some big changes, the thing to do is fire the coach. And so that's just what they did there.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because you're right. The roster that they have is probably going to be the roster that they're going to have for the most part going into next season. And for the Knicks, a lot of people want, with any team that bows out earlier in the postseason than what people think they should have, the talk is always to go after a big-time player, a big name.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make sense for the Knicks, because if you go after a Kevin Durant, for instance, he's not a guy who can play big minutes and solidify your lineup throughout the course of a regular season. So it wouldn't make sense if Thibodeau were the coach there too. So I think the Knicks bring it back, try to find, work in the margins to find some depth to help your squad out. But, that team's pretty good. The other thing too that we're seeing in the NBA, and this is no surprise, but, as much as I love Jalen Brunson, and I do, and Karl Anthony Towns, who is a terrific player, they're both one-dimensional. And we saw what the Pacers did. They identified the weakness, and especially when those two guys were on the floor together, they just kept attacking Cat and Jalen Brunson. And that was their entry point into the Knicks defense, and they had great success with that. And then you keep the other two guys like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges in rotation constantly because they're trying to cover ground for the guys who can't defend as well.
And it was both of them. That's the thing that I think is important, because obviously, like, a lot of the stuff, since they lost has gone on Cat because he's kind of an easy target and he's an easy punching bag. They were hunting Jalen Brunson too. And
Constantly.
as much as you and I have talked about this before, how much we like Jalen Brunson and how much we respect, the level of player that he's turned himself into after being a second-round pick and all that stuff. But he is a guy, and especially at his size and with as much usage as he has offensively, he's going to be a liability on that end. Yeah,
there's no question. And that's why in today's NBA, I don't know how you see this, but with the restraints now with the second apron, I would be very cautious or hesitant as an owner to pay out massive dollars to a one-dimensional player. It'd be tough because you need balance. You need guys who can get after it on both ends. And if I'm pouring in, 50, 60 million into a guy who's a great offensive player, but it can't help me defensively, that'd be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to follow this summer, not only around the league, but also here in Portland, where they're going to have to be really smart about what they do. Teams are going to have to be really smart about what they do as far as their, future contract situations and their roster and their cap space and all of that kind of stuff. If you're going to give a guy, I don't think Cat would get the contract that he got under the current CBA, where he's going to be making $60 million 3 years from now. I don't think now under the current agreement, I don't think a guy that isn't like a Jokic or a Giannis or like a level, SGA, like whoever, like a level that's like a no doubt like franchise guy. I don't think those guys are the guys that are like the level below that are going to be getting those kinds of deals anymore.
Well, what is the formula for developing a championship team right now? Do we know, or are we still waiting to see how things play out with the second apron and how teams adjust? Is it having a superstar and then versatile players around that guy? Is it 2 stars? Or is that too much now, or do we need more time to know and see how teams adjust to the new CBA?
I don't think there's really one format for it or one formula for it. It does help to have, as we're seeing that, with the 2 teams that are going to be playing each other in the finals, it helps to have an SGA who's an MVP or a Tyrese Halliburton who's an all-NBA guy. And kind of funnily, in both cases, they got those players they didn't draft those players. They got them in trades, and both of them were not top 10 picks either, by the way. So it's not just, as simple as, you get the number 1 pick, you get Wemby, now you're a title contender. You get, we'll see what the Mavs do going forward, but you get the number 1 pick, you're going to get Cooper Flag, now you're going to be a title. It's not always that simple. You have to get the depth around them, and you also have to manage the contracts. That's kind of this stuff we were just talking about with the Knicks. Like, they've got Cat making a lot of money. Brunson's on a pretty, team-friendly deal that he signed last summer, so that's something that's going to help them. But they're going to have to extend Mikal Bridges soon. They just paid OG Anunoby a lot of money. They kind of have limited ways of getting better.
How do you see the finals? Can Indiana compete with OKC, or are they going to get slaughtered?
I think they can compete with them. I would certainly pick Oklahoma City as the favorite, but I don't think – I think they're going to have a better chance against them than the Knicks would have if they had gotten through it.
Do you think it will be a 6 or 7 game series, or are we looking at like a 5 game series?
5 or 6.
I really respect the Pacers because they don't really have a superstar. Like Halliburton is.
No, Halliburton is. I think you could put Halliburton in that.
Okay, so you've got 1 star and then just a bunch of really good players.
Siakam's been all NBA before. He's kind of in that second tier below, like the Giannis's and Lukas, and
he's a terrific player.
Yeah,
he can play both ways. He's got a lot of experience. I really like his game, and Halliburton is fun to watch. And Rick Carlisle's a great coach.
Yeah, and
underrated.
The thing that's cool about Rick Carlisle is that he, the way that this team plays is totally different than the way that Dallas team that he won the title with in 2011 plays. Like he's the kind of coach that he's kind of the opposite of Tibs in the sense that like Tibs has the way that he coaches and the way that he plays, and it doesn't matter what the personnel it is. You have to get guys that fit that. Rick Carlisle, whoever his best players are, whatever personnel he has, he's gonna coach in a way that maximizes their strength, and he's very adaptable, which is something that is very valuable as a coach.
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned that. It reminds me of Greg Popovich. The teams that won the early championships with Duncan and David Robinson, totally different than the style of play they had in 2014 when they won it
with Kawhi.
Yeah,
and even like those middle ones with Tony and Manu,
totally different. But that's when you got a great coach, is that the ability to adapt and adjust based on what's going around you in the league. And they went from a defensive half-court team to a movement team that was willing to shoot the three. Very impressive.
Yeah.
And Phil Jackson, he had his system, right? It was, here's a triangle.
Yep.
This is how we do it.
And then he just happened to have like the 2 greatest, guards at playing that type of style of all time.
Yeah, it worked out for him.
Yeah.
All right, we'll keep things rolling. Sean Highkin, our Trailblazer Insider, in studio. We'll shift our focus to the Trailblazers and get his take on some of the workouts and the draft not far away, just a few weeks, coming up on June 25th. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing. All right, Sean Hyken, our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report, is in studio hanging out with me. All right, so what do you think are the Trailblazers' biggest need? I don't want to say needs, but what's their biggest need on this roster moving into the summertime? Is it guard depth? Is it guard? Is it somewhere else? What do you think it is?
It's I've been saying this since, the lottery went the way it went. It's kind of everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at even if you remove the veterans from the equation, which, we don't know what's going to happen yet with, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Anthony Simons, some of those guys. But you just kind of look at the group of young guys that are, we're looking at as kind of the, who were, we'll see who's here and who's not, but roughly the guys that are the long-term core. And that's Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Denny Avdia, Tumani Kamara, Donovan Clingan. That's kind of every position. So really, it honestly makes whatever they do with the 11th pick in the draft, it kind of makes it simpler because they don't, last year they had they were the worst or second worst rim protection team in the league.
Yeah.
And so Donovan Clingan was just an obvious guy to get because he addressed an obvious need and, it filled an obvious hole. I don't know that they have an obvious hole that they have to fill this time. So you can just take the most talent, whoever you feel is the most talented player on the board at 11 and figure out the fit later.
Do you think they would have to attach a pick to Jeremy Grant to trade him this offseason?
I don't know that they would. I think I think if they did have to do that, I don't think they would. I don't think they're going to trade him if it's a negative value asset. But I think there might be, I don't know, there's some thought that maybe it's not as much of a negative value. Even if it's not a positive value, it could be a neutral value thing. I don't know.
All right, I know what you're saying. Negative value, no. Neutral value, maybe.
That's probably the more likely.
Do you still think Grant is the most logical number one maneuver that you need to make to clear up the roster a little bit?
Oh, without question. I think that's the guy that you have to figure something out with as far as Ayton, I think they can go into the season still with. Simons, I think they can still go into the season with, and you just figure out the Sharp, Scoot, Simons, minutes. With Grant, it's so clear that the two starting forwards have to be Tumani Kamara and Denny Avdia. And so I'm just not sure where Grant fits. So I think if you can figure something out with him, I think you kind of have to.
What do you make of the reports? They continue to pop up every once in a while of Orlando having interest in Anthony Simons.
I mean, he makes a lot of sense there. I don't know exactly what the asking price would be or what the Blazers are willing to trade him for or what Orlando is willing to give up.
But makes sense for Orlando from the standpoint that he can create his own shot.
They have nobody on the roster that can do that right now. But I will also say that whenever one team is, mentioned this much as the team for a guy, usually then if the player ends up getting traded, he ends up getting traded somewhere else just because whenever there's this much smoke about unless it's at the top level of guys that are, on the market, but for these role players, I feel like there's always this guy would make so much sense here, and I don't know how much of that is the reported interest from the Magic and Simons as much as just people looking at it from the outside and saying he would make sense there. So let's just try to put out.
What do you think about the reports of bringing in a veteran like Chris Paul to be a backup point guard and a mentor?
That wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. I don't know where. I don't remember exactly where that one came from, but that's I don't know. First of all, why is Chris Paul signing up for that?
Well, if he still wants to play, how many other options does he have?
Want to play, or does he want to chase a ring somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good point.
If the price is, he's not going to be making a ton of money at this point. So
no,
I can't imagine Portland's going to be.
But how much value do you put into a veteran player? Because it's always, I hear that talk a lot amongst fans. Hey, what about a veteran to come in and kind of mentor guys? It sounds nice in theory, but, some guys aren't necessarily hip to being a mentor. The reason why I like the idea of a Chris Paul working with young guys like Scoot Henderson is because Chris Paul has made a habit of helping every team he's ever been a part of. Helping young guys, showing them how to operate in the pick and roll like we saw with DeAndre Ayton. Obviously, he's got a lot of experience. I don't know, maybe having a guy like that around could help potentially.
Well, you bring up Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton together. I don't know if running that back is the greatest idea.
That's true. That's a good point.
Tough.
If Aiton's here, that would be tough.
That would be tough. But to your point though, Chad, about the let's bring in a veteran to mentor guys. If the veteran in question is coming in fully knowing the deal, knowing that that's what that's what it is, like Malcolm Brogdon when he was here for the previous season, really embraced that and was really coming in from day one.
Yeah,
they brought him in right before training camp as part of the Drew Holiday trade, and he came in right away and said, "Look, I am trying to help Scoot Henderson out. I'm going to embrace this. That's what I'm doing while I'm here. I'm not coming in expecting to start or demanding a certain amount of minutes." If you can identify a guy like that that's totally bought in on that being what the role is going to be, then I think it makes sense. But if it's just I do agree with you that a lot of times fans will just get so attached to this idea that some veteran guy who plays the same position as one of their young guys is like, oh, he's going to just come in and be a mentor. Like a lot of the times the other the veterans, they want to play more, they also want to get paid again. They're maybe not going to be down with that.
Yeah, and I don't have an issue with that. Like just because you're a veteran and maybe your role as time has gone on is lessening a bit, that doesn't mean that you have to be stuck in a mentor role. No. What if you don't want to be a mentor? I don't have an issue with someone that doesn't want to be a mentor that's just looking out for their own interests. Like, it doesn't bother me. Now, if you want to come in, if a team comes to you and is looking for a mentor role and you agree to do that, but then when you show up, you don't do that, that's a problem.
Right.
But you're right. That's a discussion that has to be had. Like, hey, Chris, we would love to have you in a Trailblazer uniform. This is the role that we envision for you. If it's something that he's totally on board with, that's a different, set of circumstances.
And I'm just not sure that, to use the specific example of Chris Paul, I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to be what his priority is this offseason.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the workouts so far?
Well, we don't actually get to watch workouts. It's kind of like when we go cover practice. It's, they let us in after the actual workout, so we don't, get to actually watch, who looked good against who or who scrimmaged against who. But out of the 4 or 5 workouts that they've done so far,
any impressive ones that you've talked to?
As far as just media stuff, it really hasn't been like most of the guys that they've brought in are not guys that they're going to be looking at with the 11th pick. Only one, like the one that they had today, like the headliner kind of locally was Ben Gregg, who played at Gonzaga and went to high school at Clackamas.
Yeah.
So it's kind of guy with some local ties. We talked to him after the thing. He seemed like a nice guy, but, obviously he's not somebody that's going to be in the range of the 11th pick. He's more of like a second round or undrafted or G League type of guy. But it has been funny, and it's kind of hard to like really get too worked up about those guys in a year like this where the Blazers only have one draft pick. They have the 11th pick, and that's it. They don't have a second round pick.
Yeah.
They don't have a second first round pick. They just have the 11th pick, and that's the only thing that they have.
All right. So do you think this is a situation this year with the draft where they're going into draft night open to any possibility, meaning they're going to take a listen to potential deals, and if the right deal with the right value is there, they would make a deal to move that pick? If not, and they don't like the value in potential deals, they'll take a player at 11. Like, how are they approaching it? Are they dead set on taking a player? Are they going to be listening to opportunities? How do you think the approach is going to be this draft?
I don't think they're actively shopping the pick.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a situation where, and even though this front office, Joe Cronin said at his end of season press conference that they want to take a step forward next year and be competitive for the at least the play in. I don't think they are approaching this as we have to trade this pick. We have to, we can't draft another young guy. We have to trade the pick. I think they've heard, from people in the front office and in the organization that there are several players. I don't know specific names, but there are several players at that number 11 range that they like and that they feel that they would feel comfortable with taking at 11. But I also don't think that if another deal presented itself similar to the one that they made last year for Denny Avdia, that they would say, no, we're too set on drafting a player at 11. We aren't going to do that. So I think they would be open to moving the pick in the right deal, but it would have to be that type of deal where you're bringing in that type of impact player like what Denny did for them last year.
Well, what I'm always excited about with Cronin and Mike Schmitz is to see who they're eyeing, right? Because I know that they've got a pretty good feel for those type of things. And my guess would be, and you talk to them more than I do, but they probably feel pretty comfortable with who they're going to have access to right around pick 11, that they know they can get their hands on a good player. That's kind of the sense I get from them because they do their homework. They keep an eye on these youngsters, these young prospects. Like my guess is they probably have a feel on, 2 or 3 or 4 guys who would be available at 11 they would feel quite comfortable taking.
Yeah, and what I'm going to be really interested in over the next, I guess it's 3 weeks from tomorrow is the draft, so they probably have a handful more of these workout sessions. Is who comes through the rest of the rest of the time, and it's not just like, oh, they're bringing this guy in, that means they're interested in him. But I'm also interested in like who they are or are not able to get in because this could be a situation, what I kind of said earlier about how they have all this depth, they have 5 guys at at those positions. Some of these guys who are, lottery picks, and I don't know how much of this is the player and how much of it is the agent, but some of those guys' agents might be like, I don't know about Portland because I don't know how my guy is going to get playing time. So it's going to be interesting to see who they can even get in for workouts.
Yeah, you're right. Because with the 5 veterans that we talk about so often with Anthony, Grant, Ayton, Robert Williams, and Matisse Thybulle, with those 5, with the young guys, like
that's 10.
That's a jam-packed roster.
That's 10. And even if you remove Rob because he's injured so much, that's 9 guys.
Yeah.
And then you even add in like Duop Reith or Chris whoever, if you want to throw any of those guys in, like that's another, Jabari Walker if he comes back, which that's going to be something to figure out in the offseason. Like they have a lot of NBA caliber rotation players. So they're going to, if they're going to stay at 11 and draft somebody that they hope is going to be an impact guy this year, they kind of have to make a consolidation trade somewhere else.
That's interesting. So teams, obviously, if you have the 10th or 11th pick or wherever you're selecting in the draft, you could take whoever you want. But how often do agents communicate with teams like, hey, we're not really sure about the fit there in Portland or Indiana or wherever the place might be?
It's been done. I mean, it happens a lot. The most famous example that I can think of off the top of my head, we were just talking in the last segment about this finals matchup coming up, and Tyrese Halliburton before that draft was telling teams like, I want to go to Sacramento, don't draft me, which that's maybe the first time in NBA history that's happened, that an agent has like been purposely trying to steer their guy to Sacramento. But that was one that was pretty famous for like, he wants to go here, he wants to go here, he wants to go here, telling, and teams can do whatever they want. Teams can draft somebody or not draft somebody. They don't have to not draft somebody if the agent tells them not to. But this is stuff that happens behind the scenes more than you would think.
Do you think we're going to see a lot of trades league wide on draft night?
I would think so. I would hope that a lot of this stuff, whether it be Giannis or KD or whatever the case may be, a lot of this stuff could get sorted, in one direction or the other.
Do you think Giannis is going to get moved?
I don't. I actually don't. I think I feel like the noise would be louder if he was going to get traded. Like my position, and this was my position with the Dame stuff up until he actually requested a trade 2 years ago. Until it actually comes from him, it's just wish casting by, either national media outlets that need stuff to talk about or other front offices saying, hey, we're ready to make a run at him. If we get the report that Giannis has actually requested a trade, that's when I'm going to start taking that more seriously. But up until then, I'm assuming it's just not going to happen because this is not the first time that we've heard about this for Giannis and it hasn't happened.
Yeah, I heard from a source that I do trust that Giannis is not going to ask out, that he's not going to be traded.
Everything I've heard is that the Bucks, right? I mean, obviously this could change, but everything I've heard is that the Bucks are operating as though he's going to still be there next year.
Yeah. Now, the weird part about Giannis, it's a lot like Luka, but different from the standpoint that Giannis is a, two-way player.
Mm-hmm.
I would not want to be the GM responsible for dealing Giannis to another team. Like, that's a dicey proposition.
Well, if you're gonna do it, and if you're John Horst, John Horst did just sign an extension with the Bucks.
Yeah, so he's got some security.
So he's got a little bit of security. But if you're trading Giannis, you have to get every single thing you can possibly get back, and it could end up being a situation like what the Blazers were dealing with Dame 2 years ago, where and I don't know if Giannis would put this type of pressure on the organization, but Dame very publicly from the beginning when he requested a trade was Miami, Miami, Miami. The only place I'm willing to go is Miami. But if you were Joe Cronin in that situation, your basically entire career hinges on not messing up that trade. So he wants to go to Miami. That's great. And if Miami can come up with enough stuff to, feel like the Blazers were getting fair value and they weren't just giving away the franchise's all-time leading scorer, then that's great. But once the player requests a trade, the GM's obligation, no matter how much the player has done for the franchise, and with Giannis, I know, two-time MVP, won the title, all that stuff, John Horst's obligation is still to do the best thing for the franchise. So if you're going to be the GM that trades away a player as good as Giannis, you have to get the absolute best deal possible.
So what was the best thing Cronin got back in that deal? Tamani?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously. That, and if you want to extend it out, which, we've talked about this before, but most of the assets that he used in the Denny trade came from the Drew part of the trade. So you can make the argument that he got both Denny Avdia and Tumani Kamara back in that trade.
Well, that's pretty good.
And he's still got the Bucks picks and swaps in 28, 29, and 30 coming up, which, and we've talked about this before, but that's something I think, let's say Giannis does get moved. That's something I could see that I don't think the Blazers, to be clear, would be a team that would pursue Giannis or that Giannis would have any real interest in coming to play for. But they could get involved as a facilitator using those picks to give the Bucks kind of control back of their own future and peel off whoever the player is that would have been coming back to the Bucks in the trade. That's something that I think they could do if it does come to that.
Well, that's what I'm excited to see, with the Blazers, with what Cronin has done over the last couple of years, being in a position to have versatility, right? Because that's what GMs want. They want versatility. They want to have multiple tools to be able to make things happen. I feel like the Blazers right now are at least in a better position than years past to be able to facilitate some of the trades that we've talked about. And, they're in a position to where they likely need to move, a couple of veteran players.
What I've thought's been interesting since this regime took over is that when they've made big deals like that, they've always prioritized players more so than picks. Like when they traded for Denny Avdia, that was a rebuilding team giving up draft picks to get a player because they felt so strongly about that player fitting with what they were doing.
Yeah.
And with the Dame stuff, when they traded Dame, it wasn't we just want to get, 8 first-round picks. We want to get the most possible amount of picks. It was we think DeAndre Ayton has some upside. We think, the Tumani thing, whoever you want to believe about, maybe that was a throw-in or maybe that was somebody they targeted. But, Robert Williams, obviously, the health stuff with him has been what it's been. But that was a player that they specifically said we think he would fit with what we're trying to build. We like, the type of player that he is. That's a guy we want to bring in. When they've done these types of trades under this regime, they've more gone after players than picks. And that's been a pretty consistent thing.
Interesting. Sean Highkin, our Trailblazer insider, in studio. We'll come back and continue the discussion. If you want to jump on board, 503-248-0620. We'll preview the finals with Brad Botkin coming up at 5:20. Appreciate your time on this Tuesday. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. Yeah, I'm still jealous. My man Brendan saw Tears for Fears down in Vegas. I have not seen them live. One of the few bands from my era I have not seen live. We got Sean Hyken, our Trailblazer Insider, in studio. And we're just curious, what is the number one question that you're getting right now in your mailbag at Rose Garden Report?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of it is there's draft stuff. I haven't done a mailbag actually in a while, but obviously since the sale, a lot of that stuff has been, the top of mind for a lot of people. And
About
the
who
stuff
the owner's going to be.
Who's going to buy the team? Is the team going to move? Like, is this going to affect, how much they can, can they spend this summer? Like, are they going to have the green light? Is the front office going to have the green light to make roster addition this summer while the sale stuff is still up in the air? And then obviously, going forward as far as, roster stuff, there's, Jeremy Grant trade stuff, Anthony Simons trade stuff, DeAndre Ayton trade stuff. Shaden Sharp is extension eligible this summer. So is Tumani Kamara. Those are both things that I'm keeping an eye on this summer. But yeah, it's just it's not anything totally crazy out of the ordinary. But those are kind of the topics that I
do. You expect Tumani and Shaden to get extension offers?
Depends on the number. I mean, the thing you have to remember, we were talking about this earlier, is that teams have to be really, really judicious about what they do with these extensions and with some of this cap space. I think Tumani might be more likely to happen just because, A, he has only been in the league for 2 years, and so his max extension number is lower. Like, the most that he could sign for is a 4-year, $90 million extension, which for him, that's, I think he's worth that, but it's like, do they want to do that? And, as opposed to having him under that contract for the extra year for the, $2 million or whatever he's making now, but you want to, give him that security. I think for him, there's probably more, room to come to a number that everybody can agree on. Whereas the Shaden one is going to be a little bit interesting because under the old CBA, that's a guy that, pretty clearly like is going to get close to a max because, every team's like young guy, lottery pick that's shown some promise. When they come up on the extension, they're going to get like the max or close to the max. Yep. I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen this time with Shaden. And so then it's a number. It's a matter of like, is there a number that they can agree on that they're comfortable with, that he's willing to accept? That's, I don't know whether that's like high 20s, low 30s, whatever it might be. I think it's more likely that with Shaden, unless he agrees to like a really team friendly deal, that maybe they, let that play out into restricted free agency, let him play out this year because, he did make some strides this year for sure, but you're basically going off of like one half of a season if you're doing that because, his rookie season was, good, but it was, his rookie season that, there's not a lot there. Second season was completely a wash because of the injury. And then last year was, he had some high highs, but, he got removed from the starting lineup for defense at one point. So it's like, are you so sure that he's going to be one of your core guys that you're going to commit, $30+ million a year to him right now with this CBA's restrictions? I don't know.
Yeah. I wouldn't make the jump right now with Shaden. I would make him prove it.
Let him play it out. And then, I had this happen when I was covering.
If he earns it and he dominates next year, then good.
When I was covering the Bulls, Jimmy Butler was extension eligible and they offered him 4 years, $48 million. And he said, no, I think I better than that. I think I can get more. And then he proved himself right. And then they gave him a 5-year max that next offseason.
Yeah.
So, and they were happy to do it because he was worth it.
Yeah.
But
it's just, I think in some cases, I think Shaden's a good example. I think he's going to be great, but I don't know for sure because I don't have a long enough sample size. Now with Tumani, no questions asked.
I would whatever for me personally, and
I'm taking care of him right now.
They know what their financial situation, their books, and all that stuff is.
Yeah.
For me, whatever, like especially with the max being lower, his max is 5 years 90. Or 4 years 90. That's the most he would be eligible to get.
Yeah,
I would feel comfortable giving him that.
Yeah, he's worth $22.5 million.
I would. That's going to be, especially with the cap going up and up and up every year with the TV deal. I would feel comfortable giving him that.
Yeah, he's durable. He's a great defender. Yeah. He's improving on the offensive end. Yeah, I have very few questions about Tumani.
Yeah,
and I know he's going to continue to work his ass off too.
Yeah. Those are the two that I think are worth keeping an eye on this summer.
That's pretty sweet. That's pretty exciting. I'm pumped on that. I would imagine that a lot of Trailblazer fans worried about the team being moved to Seattle or somewhere else because of the fact that we're going to have a new owner coming in. I get that constantly. I mean, I've heard from multiple people I really trust, that the NBA is not going to allow the Trailblazers to move Portland. They're not going to leave. It's not happening.
So technically, it's not a 0% chance until they get a new long-term lease signed with the Moda Center, or they have an agreement to build a new arena.
Yeah.
It's not 0%, but it's something that I'm mostly completely not worried about.
Yeah, it's not a concern. I really don't believe it's going to happen. I think the Blazers are here for the long term, and the NBA, the Trailblazers have been a model franchise for decades.
Yeah.
A small market franchise. It's been a crown jewel.
That's been competitive. They've
great
made,
attendance, competitive basketball.
They've made the playoffs. So Paul Allen bought the team in 1988. That's 37 years that he's owned the team.
Yeah,
they've made the playoffs 26 out of 37 years.
Yeah, and geographically too, when you're setting up a league, it makes a heck of a lot of sense to have a team in Seattle and a team in Portland.
Yeah, like if you're going to move the team to Seattle, then you just have the Seattle team is then just going to be on an island the way that Portland is. So, you have those two teams within a 3-hour drive of each other. A lot of other NBA teams, like, Sacramento, Golden State, really close to each other. There's two teams in LA. All those Midwest teams are just a few hours apart. Like, obviously all the Northeast teams, like, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, that's all like a pretty close train ride. That cuts down on a lot of the travel stuff for a lot of these teams. Portland is kind of just on an island, and Portland is completely isolated from everybody else in the league. You just give them Seattle as one team that, like, you don't have to do like a whole day flight to get to.
Yeah.
It's going to help a lot.
All right, Sean Hyken, you can follow him on social at Hyken, and you can check him out, read his stuff at rosegardenreport.com. He is our Trailblazers insider here at 620 Rip City Radio. Sean, my man, thanks, brother. I appreciate the time. Good to see you.
You too.
All right, we'll keep things rolling. Brad Bakken going to preview the finals coming up at 5:20. You got the Rip City Drive. All right, 5 o'clock chat here. After leading the Knicks to their deepest playoff run in 25 years, New York has fired head coach Tom Thibodeau. Team president Leon Rose said their singular pursuit, which is to win an NBA championship, led to the decision. We got the NBA Finals coming up on Thursday. The Pacers and Thunder from Oklahoma City tip off at 5:30 on ABC. The Thunder are a whopping 9.5-point favorite in Game 1. How about the Oregon State Beavers? They crush USC 9-zip and now advance to the Corvallis Super Regionals. They're going to meet Florida State Friday. First pitch at 3. You can listen on your home of the Beavs, 1190 KX, or right here on 620 Rip City Radio. From the NFL, Lions center Frank Ragnow has announced his retirement. It's a big loss for the Lions. He made 4 Pro Bowls in his 7 seasons. Jim Marshall, longtime Viking, has passed away at the age of 87. He played in 282 consecutive games during his 20-year career. All right, it's nice to come back, and in my first day in nearly 3 weeks, have some goodies to give away. And we got a 4-pack of tickets right now to see the Hops take on Eugene coming up on June 13th at Hillsborough Ballpark. You're going to have a great time at the game. Check out the brand new stadium, which is being erected as we speak, and sit in the Rip City Radio row. So right now, if you would like a 4-pack of tickets to check out the Hops take on Eugene June 13th at Hillsborough Ballpark, we'll take caller 5 at 503-248-0620. Call now, 503-248-0620. That is your telephone number. 5th caller will get a 4-pack of tickets for the Hillsborough Hops, 503-248-0620. I want to hear from a baseball fan. Fire away, 503-248-0620, 503-248-0620. 5th caller right now will get a 4-pack of tickets for the Hops as they take on Eugene coming up at June 13th out at Hillsborough Ballpark. 503-248-0620, 503-248-0620. Call now, and you can watch baseball on me, 503-248-0620. 5th caller. I want to hear from a Hops fan. Do you like the Hops? 503-248-0620. All right. Brad Botkin's going to come up at 5:20, and we'll get a chance to preview the NBA Finals with Brad. He's from CBS Sports. He's down in Miami. Big fan of his. And I want to get his take on the firing of Tom Thibodeau, who has been let go by the Knicks after the deepest playoff run in 25 years. Yeah, we're good. We don't need him. The only thing that is suspicious to me is the way it's being presented, that it was a Leon Rose decision. I don't buy that for a second. That was James Dolan decision. And that's why we know it was probably a bad decision. We'll see who they're going to be able to hire. The problem with Tom Thibodeau is that he's got a shelf life as a coach for a franchise of about 5 years. And then he moves on. And that's because he grinds on guys. He grinds on people. Great coach, great defensive mind. His players play really hard for him. He's probably not a big fan of utilizing his bench or playing young players, but a lot of veteran coaches are the same way. But, I just don't trust the Knicks because I don't trust James Dolan. So I can pretty much assume that when he makes a decision, it's the wrong one. So I was surprised. That's another one of those moves where you're like, wait, what? Did I just see what I thought I saw? Tom Thibodeau's been fired by the Knicks? You kidding me? Back-to-back 50-plus win seasons. They take out the defending champs in the playoffs, and they lose to the Pacers. One, because Halliburton got the luckiest bounce of all bounces in Game 1. If it wasn't for that nonsense, they probably win that series. And they took out the Celtics. They had a wildly successful year. I just think when they played against the Pacers, they ran up against a team that was better, who had better players, who were deeper. And the Pacers got the job done. And Tyrese Halliburton right now is on a heater. He's playing really good basketball. He might be annoying. I haven't decided yet. But, yeah, the Pacers, I like the way they play their pace and the way they continue to keep the pressure on and the way they look to get the ball up court quickly and score. Like, they are – I mean, you got to be on point at all times against the Pacers. It's going to be fun to see how the pace plays out in the NBA Finals between them and the Thunder. So I'm back after nearly 3 weeks off. Not planned that way, but, I went down to L.A. for a week. I stayed in downtown at a hotel / more of an apartment type place. It definitely had an apartment feel. The Sonder Craftsman. If you're going to be staying down in L.A., I would highly recommend the location. Right in the heart of downtown, close to L.A. Live. A lot of very good local coffee shops and good restaurants nearby. But the way I do it, I like to head down and check out a baseball series. I travel to see at least one series a year. And this time around, I chose Dodger Stadium. It's a great ballpark and very easy to access from downtown L.A. I saw them lose 3 games against the Angels and 1 game against the Diamondbacks. It's amazing. They're like one of the best teams at baseball. And I just happened to catch them during very, very much a cold streak. And then the night I didn't go, Yamamoto was pitching, and he got the win. He shut him down. So it's just weird to see how that plays out. But downtown's nice because what I do is I Uber up to the ballpark, but catching an Uber ride out of the park with all the crazy people hanging around after the game is impossible. So I just walk back to downtown. And check this out. During the course of time that I was in L.A., so 4 Dodger games and then 1 day at Disneyland. So the 1 day at Disneyland from open to close, I walked and covered 14 miles in 1 day. And if you add that to all of the walking back and forth around downtown, walking back to downtown from Dodger Stadium, I walked a total of 50 miles on the vacation. And I like movement. I like to be able to move. I like the activity. And it help offset some of the food that I ate. And it was terrific. A lot of movement. 50 miles during the course of my 6 days or 6 nights down in L.A. But pretty awesome. And Disneyland was great. 30 rides in 1 day. Had a chance to check out the ballpark. And then on Sunday, it was a day game. So I came back to downtown and I walked over to LA Live. I had some dinner. And for the first time ever, I walked around Crypto.com Arena, which used to be Staples. And I got a chance to see the statues. So pretty awesome setup they've got there. And it helped me to kind of visualize what the Rose Quarter could look like if they were to add statues and kind of what I'm visualizing. The Blazers have a lot of great players in their past, a lot of guys they could pay tribute to. But for the Lakers, they have like a desk and a statue of Chick Hearn, the great longtime voice. They have a sweet statue of Kobe. And I did not see the statue with Kobe and Gianna, but I saw Kobe's statue out in front. Jerry West is out there, Elgin Baylor, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Shaq. And they've got all the statues spaced out, and they've got these sweet plaques right at the base of each statue, kind of listing the accomplishments of the player. But I saw that in the way that it is set up and the way it looks. It's awesome. And so I was trying to visualize the Rose Quarter, if they were to set it up to where you could walk around and you see a statue of Dr. Jack. And then you can read his placard about his accomplishments. Bill Walton, Clyde Drexler, Damian Lillard. Just think about all the different statues they could have out front. So as you're walking around Rose Quarter, you could have a chance to check out some of the great, players and coaches from years past. Chick Hearn's got a desk and a statue out in front. Obviously, you get one for Bill Schonely. But it was a good look. Very good. Well set up. And they had that whole area kind of on lockdown. Patrol with security. LA Live, very clean, nice setup. Good restaurants surrounding the area. And there are parts of downtown that you, like any downtown, that you probably don't want to hang out in for too long. But that LA Live area is nice. But it just gave me some ideas of what the Rose Quarter could look like if they had some statues. Brendan, you got some ideas on that?
Yeah, I think the statues idea would be sick, Chad. I mean, I've thought about that for Moda Center for a while now. And the other thing that I think Moda Center, despite our weather limitations, I think it'd be awesome to do something like the Deer District or Jurassic Park, where you've got a giant screen outside, and it's like, hey, maybe you can't get a ticket. Come hang out with a bunch of other Blazer fans and create this cool, quasi-community environment. And I think you saw it a little bit, I think, at the Knicks games as well. There's not really that culture, Chad, where it's like you go outside of Moda during a game, there's nobody out there. You know what I mean?
I agree. It wasn't well thought out when they put it together. Back in the day, they had, Friday's Front Row down there.
I heard about that. I a little before my time, but I heard that was like popping back in the day.
It was. Jim Rome had a tour stop out there, which was cool.
Really? That's cool. That is cool.
They had a Mexican restaurant, Kachina, which was pretty sweet.
So, were these restaurants that were in Moda only open during, could you only go to Friday's Front Row during a Blazer game, or could you?
If I recall, Kachina was in the location where Dr. Jax is now.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it was, and Friday's Front Row was, right across from, just down a couple of steps down from Dr. Jax, where kind of where Rebound is at.
Okay, yeah.
So these are restaurants you could hit at any time.
Yeah, I've heard some stories about that Friday's Front Row, and people were like, "Man, it used to be popping." I'm like, "Man, just different." But with you, Chad, I think there's room for improvement, and the Rose Quarter, it just needs to be spruced up. I don't know what that looks like, and I love spending other people's money, but it needs to be spruced up.
Well, one thing Sean was talking about, with the new ownership that we'll find out about here in about 9 to 12 months, one issue that's going to have to be dealt with. Keep in mind the Moda Center was put in at back in 1995. That was the first year. So it's been around for a long time. It's an old arena. I mean, what are we now? It's 30 years old. So what could happen is when the new owner comes in, they could look to build a new arena, and not necessarily in downtown, but it could be on the outskirts, maybe in Beaverton or Hillsborough. But I think what Brendan was mentioning there is that whenever you put in a new arena, wherever it's built, then you can look to have all the other elements around the arena, which I think would be pretty sweet.
It's crazy too, Chad, when you actually look at it. And, I think Moda's held up pretty well. But when you look and see they are the 7th oldest arena in the NBA, I don't really put MSG in that. Delta Center's also older, but has been gutted. Phoenix, I think, has been renovated pretty heavily. Then you've got United Center, Rocket Arena, but it's definitely in the bottom third as far as age goes.
Yeah, it's older. There's no question about it. I mean, heck, even down in Phoenix, out in Glendale, where they put the new football stadium for the Cardinals, where they host the Fiesta Bowl. Even when you go out there, they've got, and again, the weather, they don't have the weather limitations because of the sunshine and the dry weather, but what they've got out there is, one, they've got this sweet shopping area with the factory outlets, and then right next to the football stadium where people hang out beforehand. So you go down early to either tailgate or park, and you can walk over to what is like an LA Live. So they've got, a shopping area. They've got restaurants. They got screens that are all over the place, so you can watch some of the early action as you're bumping around. But it's kind of a destination spot where you can hang out up until the game comes out. And so, I mean, it'd be pretty sweet if we end up getting a baseball team with the new stadium downtown. We get a new owner with a new NBA arena, and you can have those type of spots. Destination spots to where you can hang out even if there's not an event going on. All right, we got to preview the NBA Finals. Brad Botkin, one of the best. CBS Sports is going to join us next. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All. Time to talk some basketball with my man from CBS Sports with the NBA Finals coming up on Thursday. Brad Botkin is back on the show. Now, Brad, I'm curious, as someone who covers the league, were you surprised when you got the word today that Tom Thibodeau had been fired by the Knicks? Because when I saw the headline, I was like, wait, what? And I was shocked. But what about you?
No, you can't be shocked. When you've been around the NBA long enough, when teams need somebody to go down, the coach is going down. So that's definitely not shocking. Not shocking at all. I actually kind of had my suspicions when all the talk came out so fast about how he had the support of Jalen Brunson and he had the support of the front office. It was like that came out too quick. It's like they were trying to preempt a story, and it was like, there's obviously some smoke here. Now, I wouldn't have been surprised if he wasn't fired.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised that he is.
The only thing that is a bit suspicious to me is how it's being portrayed, from people in New York, that it was a Leon Rose decision. Like, I don't necessarily buy that. It feels like a James Dolan decision. How do you see that?
I don't know. I can't speculate on that. I hear that talk around everyone, and I just have no knowledge, just like I don't know if it was Nico Harrison or the new Maverick owners who pulled the Luka trade. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you would hope that there's collaboration on this stuff. You would hope that James Dolan didn't walk in and say, fire Tom, and Leon just laid down and said, okay. I don't know. These things happen in nuanced ways. I don't know. I do know that it's a legitimate thing that some coaches are better positioned to take a team from step one to step two, from irrelevant to good. And different coaches are better positioned to take a team from good to great. Now, the history of that actually working is pretty short. So, like, you can look at Steve Kerr with Golden State. It's one of the few examples where a roster did not significantly change, and simply a coaching change took a team from a first-round exit to a championship team, which happened to the Warriors between 14 and 15 when they fired Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson was seen as the guy who could get them into relevancy, and he did that. Was not seen as the guy, even though he had the support of Stephen Curry, by the front office to be the guy to get them over the next hump. And so they made what at the time was an unpopular decision, and a decision that I'm sure on shows like this, people said, what are you firing Mark Jackson for? The Warriors were a joke. Then they won 50 games. And it's like, well, yeah, but he's not the guy to lead the next step. And obviously the Knicks don't think that Thibodeau isn't either. Now, the problem is there aren't very many Steve Kerrs out there. Most of the time you fire these coaches, Nate McMillan in Atlanta, Frank Vogel in Phoenix, Darvin Ham in L.A., Stotts in Portland, where we're going to get a new coach to change all this stuff. And usually the coach doesn't do a damn thing. The coach has about 5%, generally speaking, impact on the team. So I can understand the rationale in thinking they need to get over the hump, but it just generally doesn't work out that way.
That's interesting. The example I can think of when I was younger was the Chicago Bulls moving on from Doug Collins to hire a relatively unknown at the time in Phil Jackson, and he won a championship in a couple of years. But I remember thinking when I was younger, I was like, man, like Doug Collins, they just had a great run, and then Phil comes in and he's got his system, and we learned about the triangle, and it worked out really well. But that's the only example I could think of from when I was younger.
Yeah, and you always have to be, you have to be cognizant of the context all the time. So, like, was that – obviously Phil Jackson's a great coach and was, as his legacy would suggest, was kind of as one of the better guys at dealing with, like, top-tier talent, even if you want to like dismiss like the X's and O's and all that, like he just was the right guy to deal with the stars of the stars. And so maybe that was true, but also like, Jordan was young with Collins. He wasn't Jordan yet. Pippen wasn't Pippen yet. And so there was also this roster evolution. It wasn't like Phil Jackson inherited the same Jordan player that Collins had. And so that's where this Knicks one is interesting, where most of these guys are the players that they're going to be. And typically that's what you'll find in the NBA is the coach is the easiest variable to change when you've got a pretty fixed roster. They don't have a lot of assets to move. They have barely any draft picks anymore. They gave them all up for Mikal Bridges and Towns. So it's not like they're going to go out and add a bunch of depth or add a third star. So short of finding a suitor for Karl Anthony Towns, they're not really going to be able to change the roster that much. So if you don't have any bullets to fire from a roster standpoint, no pun intended, you fire the coach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're talking with Brad Bach and CBS Sports. I guess what impressed me with the Pacers in that series against the Knicks is how they just went after Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns at all times. Like, that was their access point into their defense, and they put OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges in rotation all the time. That was impressive to me.
Yeah, well, the Pacers are a diligent offensive team, so they have all the bells and whistles of modern pace and tempo, and Tyrese Halliburton plays with flair, but they're really a poised, organized offensive team that finds the right mismatch and attacks it over and over. They don't turn the ball over. And you're right, the Knicks were exposed, and that's why you're hearing all this talk about, everybody was talking about Karl Anthony Towns early in the season like he was on the short MVP list. Now he gets into the playoffs, and they make it farther than they've made it in 25 years, and suddenly now he's this defensive liability, and, he didn't play the last – it's like, well, what have you guys been watching? Karl Anthony Towns has never played defense. And so Jalen Brunson isn't a good defender. If you thought that putting Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns at the point attack of your defense was going to work out well for you, then you just don't know what you're talking about. So that shouldn't have been a surprise, and the Pacers were right to exploit it. Now the problem is they're not going to have any of that stuff to exploit against OKC.
No, Oklahoma City is an impressive basketball team, and I guess what's really impressive is, they're great on offense, but, man, their defense, and we saw this over the last couple of series, like, they're relentless, Brad. They just keep coming and attacking.
Yeah, so the way that most modern offenses get by is they screen good defenders away, and they find the bad ones. And there's just no bad defenders to find with Oklahoma City. You go ahead and, if you got Jalen Williams on, you're going to throw a screen at, okay, fine, here comes Cason Wallace. You got Cason Williams, I'm going to screen him. Okay, here comes Alex Caruso. I'm going to screen him. Okay, here comes Lou Dort. You can't swing the ball. The Pacers are really good about getting the ball on a certain side of the court. They kind of split the court in half, and they get all the good defenders on one side, and then they get the action over to the other so that they're not just attacking one bad defender. They get a whole side of bad defenders, which is what Towns and Brunson allow you to do. You can't even designate one bad defender on the Thunder, let alone a whole side of them. There's just waves and waves and waves of defenders that keep coming at you, that keep pressing your space, that keep jumping passing lanes. Tyrese Halliburton is very, very secure with the ball. He's under two turnovers a game in the playoffs, which is remarkable for the pace that he plays at and some of the kind of get up in the air before you know where you're going passes that he throws. It's really remarkable how he takes care of the ball. 5-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, elite stuff. There's almost no way that those numbers can continue against OKC. They put so much pressure on the ball, and pretty soon you're kind of just trying to get rid of it, and now you're throwing into a pick-six passing lane. It's going to be very, very difficult for Indiana in this series. And Indiana's a good team, but OKC's defense is an all-timer.
Do you think they'll be able to slow down the Pacers' pace?
Oklahoma City plays it I think they actually play at an even faster pace than the Pacers. So it's not a pace that they're uncomfortable playing at. I don't necessarily think that's going to be as big of an issue as, like, in the Knicks series, there were such contrasting styles with the Knicks want to play slow, methodical half-court ball, and it was like, who's going to win the pace-off? I don't think that Oklahoma City is going to be like, man, we got to slow the Pacers down. Inherently, they're such good defenders, and they're able to crash the boards with their bigs, but also sprint back. All these choices that teams have to make. Are we going to cut off penetration, or are we going to recover to shooters? Teams usually have to compromise one to do the other. Are we going to crash the offensive glass, or are we going to get back on defense to stop transition? Teams usually have to do one or the other. The Thunder don't have to pick their spots with all this. They got Hartenstein and Holmgren crashing the glass. They got Dort and Caruso and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams and all these other guys getting back on defense. So they don't have to make these choices that typically put defenses in compromised situations. So Pacers they can run, they can not run. I don't think they're going to find much success against the Thunder unless they're making their threes. They're shooting 40% in the playoffs right now from three.
Gracious.
And I hate to, it is, and I hate to make this a whole like make or miss league thing.
I know you hate
but
that.
it really, because usually you're not generating the right shots when you're missing, but it really does feel like this series is kind of a make or miss deal for the Pacers. Like they're going to have to shoot, because the Thunder, one thing they will surrender is corner threes. They spend a lot of time playing the point of attack up top and cutting down driving lanes and protecting the rim. They will give you some corner threes. The Pacers are going to have to make a lot of contested shots to stay in these games. That's really, I don't think it's a pace thing. I don't think it's a matchup thing. I think it is just plain and simple. They've got to make a bunch of threes, and they're going to have to be contested threes.
Is this going to be like a 5-game series? Because that's kind of what it feels like.
I think 5. I mean, I predicted 5. I just hesitate to predict sweeps any time in the playoffs because they're just hard. But OKC has won 2 games in each series by at least 20 points. So they're getting a couple of beatings every series. And then they're going to have a couple of close games. What I think this is going to be is Indiana's going to catch a couple of whippings. Okay, there's going to be a couple 20-point wins here. Then there's going to be 3 games that are fun, exciting, offense versus defense, up and down. Pacers are going to feel like they're in it, but they're not going to get over that hump, which they've been able to do in the rest of the playoffs. Get this. One time since 1997 entering these playoffs, one time out of 1,641 games, one time a team has recovered from 7 points down inside the final minute to win a game. Okay, 7 down, final minute to win a game. One time in 27 years. The Pacers have done it 3 times these playoffs. So typically in the NBA, these teams sort of make these runs late. They're down 2 possessions, down 3 possessions, and they sort of get this false hope, and it never actually happens. It has happened 3 times. This is like asteroid hitting the Earth type odds. and it has happened 3 times. So I think what's going to happen in this series is that luck runs out. They're going to get close in a couple games, but it's going to play out the way it typically does. They'll get to 5 or 6, and the lead will stretch back out, and they're going to lose. So I think there'll be 2 or 3 games like that where Indiana's in it, they're fighting, they're scrapping, close game, couple possessions, and OKC just wins by 7 or 8. And there's going to be a couple of beatings, too. I think it's a 5-game series. Indiana gets either game 3 or 4 at home, and then they head back to OKC for game 5, down 3-1. And in the last 2 closeout games, Oklahoma City in the second round in the conference finals has won by an average of 30 points a game. So they're going to close that game out in game 5.
Hey, Brad, I feel like Rick Carlisle is kind of an underrated coach in the NBA. What about his style are you impressed by? The way he's able to get his team to play?
So I don't like having only one way to attack. I just think if you look at all the coaches, I mean, I'm not qualified to sit here and say one way is better than another, else I'd be a coach. But I think that the more ways you have, which is probably true of like anything in life, you're very vulnerable when you only have one out. And the only out that the Knicks have is to put the ball in Jalen Brunson's hand and let him dribble the air out of it and create some kind of tough shot. That's all they got. It's all they got. The Pacers can run, they can shoot, they pick mismatches, they can get offensive rebounds and play inside, they have a stretch 5. They've got a lot of different ways that they can attack you. And so I think what Rick Carlisle does very well is he's got a guy in Tyrese Halliburton who's like the ultimate conductor. And they have this flowing offense that one time it's beating you in the half court, one time it's pick and roll, one time it's drive and kick to a shooter, one time it's a long outlet pass off a rebound and they beat you back down for an easy layup. They run off makes, they run off misses. They can just beat you in a lot of different ways. And unlike Tom Thibodeau, who's pretty rigid in how he wants his guys playing, I think Rick Carlisle really turns that team loose on the strength of having Tyrese Halliburton and trusting him to sort of pilot at random. And it makes them very difficult to predict.
That's a great assessment. We're talking with Brad Botkin, CBS Sports. I'll tell you what, there's not enough money under the sun that you could give me to where I would set a screen on Lou Dort. It's not happening.
Yeah, no thanks.
Dude.
Oh, he's a brick. He's a total brick. Yeah, it's Lou Dort. I did this story a couple of weeks ago about all the similarities between the 2015 Warriors and this year's Thunder in that they both had the first time MVP in Curry and Gilgeous-Alexander. They both kind of found that number 2 guy at the wing. Jalen Williams went 12th and draft. Klay Thompson went 11th. Then they both found this unknown defensive dynamo. The Warriors found in the second round Draymond Green, and Lou Dort, to your guy, that's the guy that the Thunder found. Undrafted in 2019. They bring him on. They turn him into something nobody saw coming. And there's just a ton of similarities between those two teams where they're an elite defense. They sort of skipped the timeline a little bit. A lot of people didn't believe in that 15 Warriors team because they sort of burst on the scene. It was like, no, they got to take their lumps first. And everyone was trying to say that about the Thunder too. Like, they haven't taken their lumps yet. It's like, no, they're too busy dishing out lumps. Like, they're just good. They're ready. They got all the characteristics on both sides of the ball. I've made this analogy before, but I might even have said it on here, but it's almost unfair to have this good a defense with the MVP offensive player. It's like, if you take an elite quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and put him on the 2001 Ravens, it's like you can't beat that team. You can't beat them defensively. You can't beat them offensively. And I quietly think the Thunder are like one of the best teams ever. I don't think anybody's going to talk about them like that. It still feels too fresh.
Yeah, but the numbers indicate that. The numbers would suggest they are.
They do. It's like 84 wins. There's like, you go back. Like, this seems like a Bill Simmons breakdown, but there's got to be, 10 teams maybe that have won 84 games if you count the playoffs in the regular season, like 82, 83, 80. There can't be many. And you're talking about the best point differential ever, 12.9 in the regular season. You're talking about the MVP. You're just all these metrics, and then the eye test of them just smothering teams. And there's a couple things that I wouldn't let people be fooled by. One being that they had to go 7 games with Denver. That doesn't mean, they're not that good. They had to scrape by Denver. Denver's got the best player in the world, and generally speaking, championship teams have one series that really, really test them. And that's actually, to me, a feather in their cap that they got tested by the best player. Yeah. And when it came down to it, in Game 7, they won by 30.
Exactly.
So they're all time.
I don't know if you made this point as well, but I think another comparison between this year's Thunder team and that Warriors team in 2015, that was the year where Steve Kerr had to go to Andre Iguodala and say, hey, we got to start Draymond, but I want you to be the captain of the bench, and it's going to be better for you, and it's going to help out the team. And he ended up winning the Finals MVP. I think Caruso is kind of that bench captain for them, where he comes in and brings his experience, and he's hard-nosed defensively, but he's kind of that trusted reserve who's a big-time player, very similar to Iguodala for the Warriors in 2015.
Yeah, no question. The characteristics across the team, I think, are like that. They have, you take a Caruso and an Iguodala, and you've got guys that are so suited to their role. Finding these pieces that fit in their role and are happy with that role. Like, Caruso has no ambition of being a go-to player or wanting more credit. Isaiah Hartenstein has no ambition to be the focal point of an offense. They're just perfectly suited, and I think that Warriors team had a lot of those same similarities, where Andre Iguodala seems like he was born to be a sixth man, defensive wing, but for the first however many years of his career, he was sort of miscast as a number one scoring option.
Yep.
Certainly in Philadelphia, even a little bit in Denver. But so when you sort of hit this everything's kind of timing in life, right? And you hit this time in these guys' careers where they're ready to play the role they were kind of meant to play. And then you have 6 or 7 of those guys all at one time, and suddenly you've got a serious, serious team.
Do you think there's any way we can get Hartenstein to stop the left-handed push shot? Because it's killing me.
No. Are you kidding me? If I was that good at anything in my life, I would just do it all day. That guy never misses that shot.
Gosh, it's like one of those shots where you're like, how is he making that all the time? It kills me. It's amazing.
It's only because I've watched him make it so much that like, it doesn't look that bad to me. But the first time I saw him shoot it, I was like, oh God, like that looks like so. It's not even a shot. It's like it's like when you're working with a medicine ball in the gym, and you're like, throwing chest passes. It's like from the chest, and it's like all elbows, and but it's down. He's got nice arc on it. That thing sometimes. The one thing I heard Andre Iguodala once, I was at a practice, and he was describing, they called him KD makes.
Yes.
And so, in other words, the ball goes through the hoop differently, even if they're both makes. It just comes down differently. Those Hartenstein push shots they go through the hoop different. They're like, it's like a little breeze through the net. Like it barely even touches it. It's like a Hartenstein make.
All right, one final question for you. Because of you, I watch a lot of social media videos from Florida, and I saw a couple of disturbing ones recently where I saw what looked to be a dinosaur, but it was just a giant alligator strolling across a golf course, which would give me a heart attack. And then gators showing up at the front door of people in their homes. Like, have you had a gator on your property?
No, because I won't move west. So like that's out like Pembroke Pines, and if you get out like by the swamps, the Everglades, forget about it. But the gators are out here. I have a friend who he likes to kind of show off that he's not scared of anything. This guy sent me a picture about a month ago where like these are back-to-back pictures. The first one is of him and my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, and his two kids swimming in like the mangroves.
Oh no!
They're like waist deep, and I'm like, oh, it looks like fun. Like 20 seconds later, he sends me a picture of some eyeballs in the water, and I'm like, where are you taking this picture from? Now he says he got up on the shore, and but I'm like, yo, get out of the water. Dude, yeah, come on. I was trying to take aim on an iguana the other day, a big old guy. I had to get my neighbor's, but I had to go get my neighbor's pellet gun, and by the time I came back here, that thing had skirted. But I got eyes on him. He's starting to get testy again. So I clipped two of them, and I think they passed the word on to their boys, like, hey, don't be going around 1600 Sweet Bay. But some time has passed, and now this guy's getting a little ambitious again. So I'm waiting on him. He's short for the world.
Oh my gosh! The thought of my daughter being in, gator-infested waters gives me anxiety. Jeez,
dude, you can't go in a mud puddle in Florida. You got to expect that there's a gator. Something that's trying to kill you is in every body of water in this state.
All right, Brad Bakken, CBS Sports. You're the man. Pacers in 5. We'll talk soon. Love you. There you go, Brad Bakken. Yeah, no, I'm not doing it. I've already made this point many a times on the show. I am not under any circumstance. I don't do bodies of water anymore. I don't get in the ocean. I don't get in lakes. No, you know why? Because I don't know what's down there. Neither do you. I don't need sharks. I don't need gators. I don't want something getting a hold of me. No.
So you're not rivers, lakes guy either?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
No, I was, but like a lot of things in life, I grew past that phase. No, it occurred to me one day when I was vacationing in Hawaii, and I was out there floating around in the water. I'm like, now how do I know there's not a shark underneath there? And then it all occurred to me that I don't know. And how can you know? Because you can't see. It's a big place out there.
Oh, yeah, no, I can think back to when I went to Hawaii in May, Chad. There was one of the days my buddy and I, we were just floating off Waikiki for, 3-4 hours. Guess anything could have happened to my lower half.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think about it too much. I'm a big water guy, so it's kind of interesting to hear that you're retiring yourself from the water. Just pools for you now, huh?
Yeah. And not public ones either, by the way. I'm not, I don't need to be in a pool or a hot tub with strangers. That's disgusting. No, I worked at a health club for too long. I saw some of the stuff that went down in the steam room and in the hot tub.
Steam rooms ain't it either?
No, people do crazy stuff. People do a lot of freaky stuff. They do freaky stuff. And I don't need that. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. Freakiness. Freaky people out there. Hey, there's no one around. We can do this. Do you realize other people are going to be sitting there too? In their bathing suit, you freaks? All right, we'll keep things rolling. Big thanks to Brad Bakken. He sent me pictures before too, man. Those iguanas, the big-ass iguanas. And the reason why I have to take them out is because They're rampant down there, and they tear up your crib. You got the Rip City Drive. All right, big thanks to our guests today, Michelle Jalali and DJ OG1 from your Portland Trailblazers. Also, a big thanks to Sean Hyken for joining me in studio, our Trailblazers insider from Rose Garden Report, and also Brad Bakken of CBS Sports. And to all of you for listening, I appreciate it. Great to be back, and I felt a little out of sorts in hour number 1. I started to feel a little bit better in hour number 2, and now it feels like home once again. But we'll be back tomorrow, Rip City Drive at 3. And then we'll keep things rolling as we get ready for the Super Regional in Corvallis coming up on Friday, where the Oregon State Beavers will try and reach the College World Series. So big thanks to all of you. Enjoy your evening, and I'll check you tomorrow at 3 with the Rip City Drive here on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. Have a good night.